I'm Amy and welcome back and happy new year. Happy first day of first video, I guess, of 2022. It is the first day of 2022 for me as of recording this. But since it is the new year, first day of a new year, first day of a new month, it's time to talk about what I watched this past month in December. And if you want to follow along with me in this video or, just my everyday logging of movies and docu-series that I watch and limited series and things like that, my Letterboxd is linked in the description down below. Before I actually get started on what is on my Letterboxd, what I logged on there, some of the TV shows I watched this month. I've been rewatching How I Met Your Mother. I do that every year around this time of year, I feel like, but also because the new How I Met Your Father is coming out on Hulu this month. I don't really care about it except for the fact that it's got Hilary Duff and Josh Peck in it, and it's really going to kind of be the Lizzie McGuire reboot that we wanted to get on Hulu, but Disney did not want to put on Hulu. They wanted to put on Disney Plus, so it wasn't going to really be what Hilary Duff and the creator wanted. So I'm taking what I can get, and that's probably about it. Also, I have been rewatching Doctor Who. I watched the new season for a podcast I did on Patreon, and I'm going to do a ton more things like that in the future this year. So if you want to see me talk about TV series versus just movies, that's where I'll be doing it. Definitely check out my Patreon. Other TV shows I've been watching, I watched Hawkeye, but you'll see that in my Letterboxd. Don't think there's any other TV that I really watch a lot. I do listen to a lot of podcasts. The playlist is always linked in the description with every podcast I listen to, and it's updated on an almost daily basis. So let's get into what is on my Letterboxd. So the very first thing that I watched was Jennifer's Body. There was a bunch of stuff leaving Criterion, and Jennifer's Body just got put on there in October, and I have not seen it yet. It's been one that I've wanted to see for a long time. I also watched a couple films that were leaving Criterion that were on 1001, including Superfly, Don't Look Now, and His Girl Friday. I really, really liked His Girl Friday. I think it's a Cary Grant movie, and I never dislike a Cary Grant movie. Then I watched a couple of new movies. That is the theme this month, is trying to get as many new movies that came out in 2021 watched before the end of the year, especially, the 31st. So I watched The Harder They Fall, The Power of the Dog, and Army of Thieves. I really love The Power of the Dog, which is weird because the only other Jane Campion film that I have seen, The Piano, I was not a huge fan of. The film professor that had us watch it was obsessed with it, and she talked about it, I think, for 3 weeks straight, and that may be why I'm not a huge fan of it. But also, I'm not a huge fan of that movie in general. It was a well-made film, the story wasn't something for me. The Harder They Fall was okay. It wasn't as good as I thought everyone had been saying it was, but, it's still a great film with a great cast. And then I watched Assault on Precinct 13, that was leaving HBO, and I have been wanting to watch that for forever. I love John Carpenter. And I watched a bunch of stuff on HBO. My Left Foot, which is a 1001 movie that was leaving HBO, starring, wow, why did I forget his name all of a sudden? Daniel Day-Lewis. And then I watched a couple of Pink Panther movies. I wanted to watch all of them. They were all the Peter Sellers ones, and the 2 Steve Martin ones were leaving HBO. I didn't get a chance to watch all of them. I just was able to watch these 3. They're not perfect movies, but Peter Sellers is great. And then the next day I watched Being the Ricardos. I'm going to do a whole video on this, and it's not going to be one of those 2-minute reviews that I normally do. It's going to be a very long me talking about this movie, because this movie was one that I was very, very excited for. It's probably been my most anticipated movie for, I want to say 5+ years. I think since 2016, when they first announced that Sorkin was writing it and that Cate Blanchett was supposed to be Lucille Ball, and I'll talk about all of that. I'll just say right now it didn't live up to my expectations, and I have a lot of issues with it. That's why that review is going to be a lot longer than the 2-minute review. And then I watched a bunch of movies. We did a Christmas winter spectacular for the podcast. We did Elf, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and A Christmas Story, which that's a great episode. If you have not listened to it, it's very fun. We talk about all 3 of these movies, and we all have very different opinions. Some of them are very, very surprising. Next, I watched a couple movies that were leaving HBO, including The English Patient and Reds, which were 1001 movies, and Snake Eyes, which was surprisingly good. It's a Nick Cage movie. I did not think it would be that good, but, it was a surprisingly good movie. And then some more movies that were leaving HBO. Dante's Peak, The Cable Guy, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead was surprisingly really, really great. I did not think I would love an 80s movie that much. Actually, no, wait, 1991. So maybe that's why. I don't know. But I do like 80s movies, but I didn't think I'd like an 80s, 90s rom-com that much. But it is more of a comedy than a romantic movie. Downhill, I really did not like. That came out 2 years ago now, with Will Ferrell and Julie Louis-Dreyfus, and I was very disappointed in that movie. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always is a heartbreaking film. It's so well made, and as a woman, it really cut to my core, and I recommend giving it a watch if you have not. The Doors movie it's Val Kilmer, and yeah, it was boring. I guess I'll just say that. Yeah, it's boring. It's like any other movie biopic about musicians, basically. I watched the Ted Lasso Christmas special on YouTube. Oh, so cute, so good. I love it. I love everything Ted Lasso related. I don't care. I watched the new Spider-Man movie. I had terrible seats for this. I got extreme motion sickness throughout it. I did not actually throw up, thank God, but I felt nauseous and headachy most of the time, but I still was able to enjoy myself. And then I think all of these, except for Office Killer, so from Out of the Past to Smoke, those were all 1001 movies that were leaving Criterion. Definitely recommend Smoke. It was good. I did not think I would enjoy it as much as I did, but it is a Harvey Keitel movie. It has, I always forget her name, Stockard Channing from Grease. It is kind of a Christmas movie. I didn't realize that. But it's really fun. It's interesting. It's very much a character relational study. It's definitely kind of a weird father issue movie as well. Office Killer was also surprisingly great. This one, I believe it's been in my watch list for a while, and because I saw Letterboxd had posted something on their Instagram about it, and I was like, you know what? That sounds really cool. Really cool. Wow. Am I Katie Heron? Really cool. I had seen something about them. I think they posted something about Carol Kane, and they did like a short description of it. They talked about the director, Cindy Sherman, in that post. And I put it in my watch list. I put it in my list to watch on the Criterion channel. And then when it was leaving this month, I absolutely had to watch it. It's great. It's really fun. It's a great slasher movie. It's hilarious as well. So I highly recommend it. I wish there were more slashers like this. Watched Anastasia for the podcast, that episode came out yesterday. It was our first episode of the new year. Really great. I love Anastasia. So good. Now we are getting into my Christmas break time, where all I did basically was watch movies. So there's going to be a lot, and I'm going to run through them kind of quickly maybe. One of the true crime podcasts that I listen to called True Crime Obsessed, they are great. I love them. If you like true crime, you will like them. They talk about different documentaries, docuseries. They talked about this Discovery Plus documentary called Fruitcake Fraud. It's insane. It's really funny and weird, and I highly recommend this. It's on Discovery Plus. If you do not have it, I definitely recommend checking it out. But yeah, that was I think that's the first true crime thing I watched this month. It took me almost the entire month to watch something true crime. And then I watched a ton of movies that were leaving Criterion that were on the 1001 list, including Alice, which is an animated, well, it's more like live action with stop motion. Then I watched Dr. Strangelove, which was one of the 1001 movies I was watching for this month. I actually did a video on it on my Patreon. If you want to hear me talk about Dr. Strangelove. I also watched Kramer vs. Kramer and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Then I watched The Kingsman, which will really let me down. Very, very upset with that movie. I love the Kingsman franchise. I love the first 2 Kingsman movies, and I had such high hopes for this. Such high hopes because, you know, Ralph Fiennes. Also, it's the Kingsman franchise. It really let me down. I was very, very sad with it. And then I watched Unraveled Experts on Trial, which is the video true crime version of the Unraveled podcast, which is from Discovery Plus as well. It's hosted by 2 of the hosts of my absolute favorite podcast, true crime podcast, The First Degree. They do a, I think, 8 to 9 episode podcast, and then its kind of visual form is in the Unraveled versions. It's a true crime podcast, a true crime documentary. I kind of prefer the podcast version, but I do like being able to kind of see people and see a little bit of the recreations in this. And then I also on that day watched both the original Nightmare Alley, which I loved. I have it on my list to get from Criterion. It came out on Criterion, I think, in October, and I loved it. I watched the new Nightmare Alley, which I did not like as much because it is basically a shot-for-shot remake, even though it is Guillermo del Toro. It's a shot-for-shot remake, basically, of the original Nightmare Alley with a couple things added in, and the stuff that they added in didn't really do much for me, and they could have added in stuff for other characters or expanded other characters' backstories in more ways than what they did, and yeah, I feel like they unbalanced the extra additions. Also, that night I watched the new Matrix movie, which it was a Matrix movie. It was a Matrix sequel. It's probably better than the second and third Matrix movie, but also it's not as good as the first one. Then I finished Hawkeye the next day, which I loved it. I was surprised at how much I loved it. I was not excited going into Hawkeye, even though I love Christmas stuff. I just didn't really care about Hawkeye, but episode 3 really pulled me in, and I had so much fun. And then I watched Doctor Who the Snowman episode because that was my bonus feature review on Patreon in December. If you want to see me talk about that, along with a ton of other Doctor Who stuff, check out my Patreon. And I watched a couple more films leaving Criterion. I watched a lot of stuff leaving Criterion. The Last Seduction, 1001 movie. Only Lovers Left Alive, The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, East of Eden, Heaven Can Wait, The Desperate Hours. Those were all leaving Criterion. I think the only one that was 1001 was The Last Seduction. The Desperate Hours was really good. I did not think I would like that as much, but it's based in Indianapolis, you know, my hometown. They talk about a lot of different streets, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly where that is, which is weird. And I think it was Humphrey Bogart's last film, but really great. It's based on true events. You know what? I'm going to edit something on here in real time because I'm pretty sure I can label this true crime. And add this to my true crime and cults list because I completely forgot that was true crime. Anyways, I highly recommend that one, and I also watched Paths of Glory, which was the other 1001 film for this month. It was a Kubrick month. There were 2 other Kubrick films that I had to check off, so it was like 4 Kubrick films I had to check off. 2 of them I'd watched previously. Paths of Glory was the last one I needed to watch. Then I watched the Beanie Mania documentary on HBO, which was just a huge flashback for me. It was, I think, an hour and a half of flashback. How long is it? 80 minutes? Yeah, it was 80 minutes of a flashback for me. It was insane. I absolutely remember the entire Beanie craze. Then was Christmas movie time, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and The Santa Claus, because it was Christmas Eve. And I hadn't really watched any Christmassy stuff except for the movies for the podcast and Hawkeye and The Snowman. The Snowman really did get me into the Doctor Who episode, got me into the Christmas spirit, but it's not Christmas for me unless I watch Grinch, Santa Claus, A Christmas Story, which I had already watched, and It's a Wonderful Life, which you'll see I watched on Christmas Day. I also watched The Postman Always Rings twice, High Society, On the Town, To Have and To Have Not, 42nd Street, Gandhi, Holiday Affair, It Happened on Fifth Avenue. Whew, that was a lot. Some of those I think all of those were leaving HBO, and Half of them were 1001 movies that I needed to watch. All of them, except for Holiday Affair and It Happened on Fifth Avenue, were all 1001 movies. Holiday Affair and It Happened on Fifth Avenue were Christmas movies. I didn't think I realized that they were Christmas movies until I watched them, but except for Holiday Affair. White Christmas and It's a Wonderful... White Christmas was the other one that I needed to watch for it to be Christmas. So I watched those two on Christmas Day because it's not Christmas without them. And I watched the new Don't Look Up movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, a ton of other people. I really liked it. It's a fairly divisive film, but it is a realistic, satirical realistic film. I don't know. Either way, I really enjoyed it, but also I have a bias towards Leonardo DiCaprio. I also watched a ton of more stuff leaving HBO. That's Entertainment. I watched part 1, 2, and 3. Those were all leaving HBO. They're documentaries kind of about musicals from MGM. They're okay, but I love film history, so that kind of worked out for me. I also watched Natural Born Killers and Blow Up, which were 2 1001 movies leaving HBO. There was a ton of 1001 leaving HBO this month. And then I watched The Manhattan Project and The Outsiders, which were just leaving HBO, and they looked interesting to me. Keep Sweet is a documentary about Latter-day Saints, and it surprisingly shows both sides of the people who do not like LDS and people who are in LDS and who are not in LDS but are friends with them and trying to support them as they get kicked out of their homes. It is a Discovery Plus documentary. And then finally I watched Eyes Wide Shut, which I think is the last Stanley Kubrick film that I have to watch outside of some of his early work prior to Paths of Glory. The next day I went to see Licorice Pizza. Finally, it's been one that I have been dying to watch since it came out. It's very good. I was surprised. I wasn't surprised. I knew I was going to like it, but I enjoyed it a lot. It's a little bit of a rom-com, but not really. I watched a ton more stuff leaving HBO. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Scorsese film. Mwah, so good. Driving Miss Daisy, which I didn't like as much as I thought I would. I don't know. Contact was great. The Green Mile, I loved. I was crying the entire time. The Shop Around the Corner, another James Stewart movie, and it is a Christmas movie. I did not know that until I watched that. Interview with a Vampire. Yeah, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise. It was okay. I didn't like it as much as probably a lot more people do. And then To Die For, which is a Nicole Kidman movie. Very, very funny. So funny. Kind of a little bit of a horror movie, but not really. It's kind of like with Office Killer, where it's a funny slasher, but To Die For isn't really a slasher. It's just a dark comedy. And then I rewatched Being the Ricardos so I could take in and take notes on absolutely everything because it's on Prime now, and I can easily take notes and dissect it a little bit better. I watched another true crime documentary on Discovery Plus, The Kentucky Murder Mystery, The Trials of Anthony Gray. It was, interesting and weird, and it was kind of more about how the guy didn't kill his parents and trying to get him off that, but they didn't really end on any resolution because his trial just happened, and this documentary came out in 2020 and his trial happened in October. Too Late for Tears, From Hell, Monte Carlo, Robinson Crusoe on Mars were all leaving Criterion, so I checked those all off. And From Hell, Johnny Depp, there's so many good people in this, and it just was not a great movie. It's about the Jack the Ripper murders and the prostitutes, and I'm listening to a true crime podcast about the women that were murdered by Jack the Ripper, and it's kind of eye-opening that not all of them were prostitutes. Only I think one of them was actually a prostitute, and it's just something kind of interesting to see how history glorifies the killer and casts shadows and doesn't really cast the victims in good light. So, and the victims are usually female, so that too. But From Hell kind of really casts the victims in bad light. Then I had a Pirates of the Caribbean marathon because of From Hell. I watched From Hell and I was like, you know what? I kind of want good Johnny Depp, and Pirates of the Caribbean is the only good Johnny Depp. Well, at least the first 3. And then the 4th and the 5th one are not good. I do not like the 4th and the 5th one. Little Shop of Horrors and Other People's Money were movies that were leaving HBO, and I wanted to watch because Little Shop of Horrors, the remake, the musical, is one that's been on my list to watch forever. I really liked the original, so I checked that off. And then Other People's Money is a Danny DeVito movie. It's an 80s comedy, 91. Again, I don't know, I can't tell the difference between an 80s and an early 90s comedy. It's okay. You know, it's a standard Danny DeVito comedy movie. And then I watched the Netflix satire documentary, Death to 2020 and Death to 2021, because I hadn't watched the Death to 2020 yet, so thought I might as well watch that before I watch whatever happened this year. Arsenic and Old Lace was leaving Criterion. So good. It was surprisingly good. I don't know why it's surprising to me that this was good, but Cary Grant, again. This, I think, is Cary Grant's best facial acting. It's so funny, so good. And then I ended 2021 with a bunch of new films. The Lost Daughter, it's on Netflix. It is directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it stars Olivia Colman. Forgot for a second there. It's pretty good. I enjoyed it. Street Gang, which is a documentary about Sesame Street. Beautiful. The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne, which also stars Benedict Cumberbatch. Fantastic. It's about Louis Wayne and cats, and, you know, I love cats. And then I watched Passing, which is a Netflix movie, and it has, let's see, Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson in it. It's very good, and the end is very, very heartbreaking. And then I watched 2 documentaries. The Alpinist, which, if you liked Free Solo, definitely check this out, but it is not the same as Free Solo in a way. It's sad, but it's also hopeful and joyful and very beautiful, and also will give you a panic attack. The last thing I watched in 2021 that was not Harry Potter, because I went into the new year watching Harry Potter marathon, because, you know, why wouldn't I, was the Alanis Morissette documentary on HBO, Jagged. I loved it. I love Alanis Morissette. I credit Alanis Morissette with who I am today, kind of. But anyways, that is everything that I watched this month. It's a lot. This was a lot longer than I thought it would be. My voice is dying because I stayed up too late last night and I talked a lot today. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys watched at the end of last year. If you have any recommendations for me for this year. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really truly do appreciate you. Whoever you are, let me know who you are in the comments down below, and let's be friends. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe if you're new, because I love talking things, movies, TV shows, filmmaking, mystery, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you next time. Bye.